There are not many pieces of media out there that have gotten the time travel plot point correct. Although we'd love to think that Sonic the Hedgehog belongs to the club that do the concept justice, he and his series do not. His foot is in the door, however. Well, to be exact, it all centers on him and one telekinetic hedgehog to act as the keys. We're going to take a crack at uncovering exactly how the creators have this phenomenon structured, and look at some possible alternatives in case we don't like the findings. Sonic CD's time travel shenanigans were cool when they were first introduced. Little did we know that time would become this sort of reoccurring plot device to be used in some high-profile entries. Sonic 06 is the first culprit in this analysis, but there isn't much under the hood. It's pretty simple. Guy and girl are tired of the world being in ruins. Mr. Evilman shows up and promises that there's a way to change all of this. Said guy and girl, mostly guy, who will do anything to stop the chaos, agree to heed Mr. Evilman's instructions, and we have a story from there. While inherently an easy story to follow on paper, the many back and forths presented in Silver's campaign begin to show cracks. The first point of contention is right about here. Silver and Shadow go into the past to discover the truth behind Solaris, which turns into them assisting the Duke and researchers with recapturing the god. Both hedgehogs give Elise an emerald and the Scepter of Darkness respectively. Somehow, Elise is shown to remember Silver and not Shadow for some reason in the opening cutscene for Sonic's story. Not only this, but she says nothing to Silver when him and Sonic first encounter each other and fight. Keep in mind though, this is a Silver that hasn't officially met the princess in person yet, so that's his excuse. Skipping past the 10 years ago experience, the next time we see an instance of time travel is when Silver and Sonic use it to solve their correlating issues. Here's where things get interesting. In this exact moment as they jump through the portal, Sonic is in the past, Silver is in the future, and Shadow in the present. Which of these is the actual main continuity timeline though? Walk with me for a bit. Obviously, everything is reset at the end of the game, but let's humor this conversation since it's going to be an important point for us to look back on later. Which of these is a timeline through which the rest of the game takes place in? You could say Sonic's, since at the beginning of the last story, he and Elise are seen walking through the jungle area of the game. An argument can also be made for Shadow since he takes down Mephiles for all intents and purposes, at least for this moment. What makes this whole thing tough to call though is Silver's campaign. Him being however many years in the distant future has worked out in his favor up until this point here on. Should we believe that Silver is technically in Shadow's present timeline, then sure, things make sense as Mephiles was defeated and Iblis went on to just do his own thing. What creates this paradox, however, is the fact that Mephiles is still in this future and the whole reason why Silver even goes to the past in the first place. How is there a copy of him in this timeline if this is where Shadow won their fight? Now, let's go with the idea that this is Sonic's past timeline. Well, that just doesn't work either because Elise was saved by the blue blur, and as far as we know, Iblis is only released if she cries. Not to mention, in Sonic's past, Mephiles kills him, so wouldn't that mean that Solaris is formed? If so, then how does Silver get to Iblis Fight 3 in his future? You still with me here? The Chaos Emeralds are MacGuffins that can perform all types of miracles and unknown party tricks. Hell, I should know, I even did a video on it. So, it wouldn't be too far out of the realm of possibilities for the gems to allow for traversal between dimensions as well. And I'm not talking about a soul dimension either. We're talking about exact replicas of your homeworld, from the grass to the structures around them, and the animals that inhabit the very same ecosystem that make it run smoothly. The very same right now that you left to go and save the past or future for. Well, things may look the same, but time stands still for no one. Not even... You know, when I make these character or plot device analysis videos, I often look into what the purpose of whatever the subject matter is and the goals that are meant to be achieved by it. A common theme that I found in all of these is, unironically, time. Whether it's the race against the clock to save the remains of a lost civilization, or the quick creation of an imperfect robot doppelganger that would forever be lost in the shadow of its organic counterpart, and even in a more real-world sense, what happens when you have to rush a product out the door to impress investors? My bad, too real. Anyway, time is one aspect that money can't buy. However, desperation can breed innovation like no other, and the anchor point of this entire story going forward is where we're headed next. Sonic Generations raises one flag in my mind when everything is said and done. Why was it not marketed as classic Sonic being from a different dimension from the very start? Before you get your pitchforks, I need you to play along for a sec. Time loops are this all-encompassing mass of confusion that seem fun at first, but the more you think about it, the more things begin to spiral. Forgetting that this was written as an anniversary game, why did none of the classic games cover the story of Generations? Even if said classic game wasn't released, why doesn't modern Sonic remember it? There is no lore trace of the events of Generations taking place in any continuity prior to the release of the game. It's as if everything naturally happened one eventful day. The more you think about it, the closer you get to the realization that this was perhaps supposed to be the thing that happened all along, but time had other plans. The Dark Ages, as some like to call it, and there being a lack of good Sonic games, blah blah, swinging in hot right off the heels of Colors with a game claiming that there's actually two Sonics from two different dimensions. In 2011, that's a recipe for financial and social disaster. Let's get back to the point though. With the end of Generations, classic Sonic goes back to what we assume to be the past, but it's my theory that this is not the past at all and instead a reality that stays with the classic aesthetic. Need some further evidence for this? Sonic Forces and Mania has you covered in that regard. The Phantom Ruby somehow appeared on Angel Island due to a dimensional breach, and causes energy signatures to go haywire, after which we see Sonic, Tails, and Eggman's posse all rush to get to the source. At the end of the game, of course, this classic Sonic is left with the Ruby and gets transported to the events of Sonic Forces. Now, how did this gem know that Sonic's help was needed at this exact moment? Well, let's take a look at everyone's favorite punching bag. After the final fight with Infinite, he is seen apparently talking to the Phantom Ruby, exclaiming that he's not done and needs more time. This wouldn't be the first instance of a character communicating with powerful gems either. Quick plug back to that Chaos Energy video, you should def check it out. I recall how Knuckles, Tikal, and Shadow are all linked to the Emeralds in some capacity and can communicate with them on a mental level. If we're to use that as a basis, the Emeralds, which are also gems of somewhat unknown origin, have the ability to express emotion, move on their own, and communicate with those they specifically choose. Who's to say other gems in this universe can't do that too then? The Phantom Ruby having a mind of its own would explain the reason why classic Sonic gets sent to a future during the events of Sonic Forces. Additionally, this explains how none of these large-scale events are the ones that the modern Sonic we know remembers ever happening. The rule of thumb for interacting with yourself in the past is to never do it, lest you wager the unfortunate reality where you are never born. Should you want to harken back to Generations and use the two Sonics being in extremely close proximity though, well, if your cup of tea is that these two are still both the same Sonic, then I could concede that the white space area allows for beings to be exempt from the laws of time travel. However, in that same breath, what about when they're all back at the birthday celebration, is now my question to you. There are an endless number of multiverses out there, but whether or not they all stem from a pebble being caked or not versus said pebble being a glorified taxi is still up for debate. Sometimes, the answer lies ahead of us though. Silver the Hedgehog is a character that's half carried by his awesome abilities and half carried by what he could be. Potential has always been the name of the game with this dude. He could eventually be stronger than Sonic and even Shadow, or perhaps have better battle knowledge than someone like Knuckles. The White Hedgehog could even assist or even be the one to save the world multiple times. You ever wonder why every time Silver returns to his future, something else has magically happened all of a sudden? Rivals 1 and 2 could be easily explained due to Eggman Nega. But then you have a huge jump in between games from Generations to Forces, where we're supposed to believe that after the events of the former, Silver went back to his time and witnessed what Eggman had done, but didn't come around until after Sonic Lost World. Now, we don't know exactly even how Silver gets to and from these different futures, he just kinda ends up there. But coincidentally, 06 does show that at least Sonic and Shadow know how to induce a double chaos control to open a rift portal, so let's go with that. If this is how Silver the Hedgehog gets back and forth between destinations, then what's stopping us from playing into the previously established points? Let's take it a step further. During the early issues of IDW, Silver leaves shortly after the war efforts and the issue of Master Overlord are taken care of. When he returns, that's when he finds out that the metal virus has completely consumed the world. Later on in that metal virus story arc, Sonic mentions that the reason why Silver's world was taken over by the plague was possibly due to the fact that he wasn't in the past to assist our heroes. How could this be the case? After all, if we're to believe that the past, present, and future iterations of the characters we know are different individuals, then how come a Silver wasn't there to help? In my mind, there's only one reason. These haven't been different time periods traveled to. They've been different worlds. The only constant that we've ever seen in every single iteration of Sonic is a blue hedgehog and a mad scientist. For those that can time travel in between worlds, it's usually to a place that requires their assistance with a very specific matter because a variant of them doesn't exist there. Silver being the one that saves the rest of the cast by getting the last Chaos Emerald. Classic Sonic needing to be present for the events of Generations and Forces. Even to an extent of Blaze being taken over to Sonic's dimension forcefully by the will of the Soul Emeralds. Sure, you have the butterfly effect that could explain the reasons why the Metal Virus took over was because Silver went back in time to help with the war against Eggman, thus creating a split timeline. On the flip side of that though, as much flack as it's gotten, Avengers Endgame actually did a decent job at explaining the one aspect of time travel. Just because you change the past doesn't mean that the new future becomes your reality. It becomes a reality of a different world. To hammer this home, take into account Sonic Superstars. If Sonic and the gang had met Trip already, then there's a high chance she would have been mentioned in some form or fashion by now. It's happened with Fang, Bark, Bean, etc. Why the alternate dimension discussion was used as a quick conversation drop and nothing else is beyond me. But I feel as though a much more interesting story could have been told if that was a plan from the jump. Of course, as I mentioned, the 2000s weren't kind to Sonic and all that jazz, but it's still fun to think about. Let me know what you all think about this theory and if you agree or disagree with my stance. Time travel makes my brain hurt, hence why this video came out a day late, since I had to rack my brain trying to separate potential ideas from what really happened. Either way though, I'll see you down in the comments section or catch you in the next video. Have a good one.